Va, 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 va. Hello, my name is Pelayo Suarez Borrego, and in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about Ghost in the Shell and how this film focuses some of the main themes of the film, which properly convey how this film is a pivotal example of science fiction in cinema, how the themes, the tropes in this film are such clear examples of it, and how it uses its philosophy in order to convey the core of science fiction, which is showing certain fears, beliefs in a very experimental and sometimes overly dramatic way. So Ghost in the Self prominently conveys the concept of the self. This is deeply rooted in the main character Makoto, whose whole body has been transformed into a synthetic shell, a machine, except her brain, which is the only part of her body which remains organic. This is the source of her struggle, and it is what pushes the whole dynamic of the film. Apart from the main plot, it pushes the character's growth. This society has shown the concept of soul. It has shifted it. Now that everything has become synthetic, having mechanical parts has literally become the status quo. The concept of self has become different. The concept of a soul has now morphed into the concept of a ghost, which is trapped inside a shell. It is considered to be immutable, irreplaceable, and crucial part of a person. And this is where the main character starts to doubt. She has to believe that since her entire body has been synthesized, she has been replaced, why can't her soul have been replaced? She judges that immutability of herself. She doesn't believe that she is no longer she. So this drives her completely through the movie. Despite what her doctors, her friends, colleagues, everyone in the film, she does not believe that she is truly her. And of course, these concepts really show up, are presented on the philosophy. And this philosophy is not just random tidbits of empty platitudes. These philosophies are crucial in all of science fiction, and this film is a perfect example of that. So from a scientific standpoint, there is a saying by Margot's research that rather than imagining myself as high, Margot suggests that I am always we. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that. Always a product of fusion. Of course, if we look at it from a very scientific, a very tangible point, it's about how we're made of cells which are composed of little organs, and in fact, even the mitochondria at one point used to be a different organism that fused. So we are constructs, and that look at Makoto. She's a construct of no longer fleshy beads and gooey parts. She's about mechanical gears that go clink clang, and no longer human, but still a construct. But in the other side, we have the philosophical part, where Hume talks about how we are a collection of our perceptions, our mind, our personality is both made out of nurturing and nature. Everything we believe makes us. Everything we experience makes us us. So still, in the same way, our bodies are constructs, our minds are constructs as well. So these two arguments, which are presented in the film, in Makoto's body, and also at the end of the film, she is combined with this other character. So there are two minds together. Makoto still believes in a way she's Makoto, but now she's something else. She's a construct. So these two concepts are combined into its own allegory. But it's a great example of how philosophy and science come together to create science fiction, showing how this medium conveys so much. So it conveys such specific elements that come from very distinct place, one very material and one very esoteric, coming together thanks to science fiction. And science fiction does have some excuse me for a moment. So science fiction has some very interesting subjects. Most of it comes from a fear of what's to come, the fear of the future. So, of course, it was not long before our darkest fears sneaked from the shadows and made themselves manifest in science fiction. Very clear, especially with the uprising of machinery and prosthetic limbs. We're afraid we're going to lose ourselves. And that's very clear in Makoto's story in Ghost in the Shell. It's even more prevalent now. So that's kind of one of the points of science fiction. It carries over, it maintains. Science fiction sees how the future is going to be and takes a step further. That way, what was still relevant back in the 90s when the movie came out is still relevant now even more. Now we can look back to this film and fear what's to come, fear that our bodies will be substituted, and in that way, us as a people. And in this, these fears, they have tropes, they have symbolisms that carry over. So, for example, in right now, a very current example is the multiverse. It's a big fear we have. What is something else? There's something else, something big, something unavoidable. And surprisingly, although this is a very current example, we already have tropes. We already have reoccurring gags, symbolism. As I'm showing right now on the slide, we have the bagel, the everything bagel from Everything Everywhere All at Once, which surprisingly makes a return in the newest blockbuster science fiction multiverse film, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, in which the Big Bang, the big starting point of the big menace towards the multiverse, is Spider-Man throwing out a bagel at a character, which, as ridiculous as it sounds, it's already showing a trope. The bagel, you could even say that the bagel is a metaphor for the wholeness of a perfect circle. That's a different subject I'm not ready to unfold yet. But as we see, science fiction, it's recurring, it's kind of in our collective subconscious. And we see this in Ghost in the Shell. For example, as I'm showing here, in films such as RoboCop, we have a character whose entire body has been destroyed and substituted by mechanical parts, who is owned by a company who uses it as a mechanical war dog. And despite from the plot similarities, we have very similar scenes. As I'm showing here at the top, we see a scene where Makoto is going to fight a gigantic monster machine, which she defeats with the power of her body. She destroys her body. She pushes her machine parts further thanks to her spirit. And same with RoboCop. This machine man fights a gigantic monster machine thanks to his human side. It's not as dramatic or cinematic as in the film. So instead of fighting it by destroying his own body, he just uses his human side. He just walks down the stairs and the machine cannot follow them. Again, it's not as cinematic or dramatic, but it still shows how human spirit, the human mind, perseveres over machines. I kind of accidentally skipped ahead of this one. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about this. I'm just gonna need a second. All right. So the main film, the main purpose of the film is to talk about identity, both in the physical and the deeply personal sense. The main character struggles constantly with who she is in every event of the film, either as a main point of her identity or as a challenge towards their resolution, which we don't really expect to see, or as soon as we feel like the film is taking us to a certain point, both us and the character, we are taking a left turn, because as we explore more about what it is to have this body, we have more doubts about who we are. And now, the same way that technology will change us, technology will change our beliefs. So, in a very, I'm sorry about this again. So, the film, in this world, we're presented with a society that embraces cybernetic enhancements, and it's deeply. I'm so sorry about this. Yeah, I'm just gonna need a second. Yes, so science fiction, it changes us. It changes how we see the world. It proposes these questions that we're not ready to ask, but it forces us to. So it engraves in our minds. It's like it's a jackhammer. It forces us to think about it, and what it presents, it changes how we look at things, and in the same way, then we will change how we see science fiction. And one of these main things that makes us think of it is dystopian films. So, dystopian films usually show a very distorted version of the future, very dramatic, exaggerated, which show how you say catastrophic events. It gives us the most simple change, like in Mad Max, it was like the price of gasoline, and now everything's a wasteland. Where in Ghost in the Shell is, we are presented with just small change, a bit of cybernetics to help us around, and now we have robot people, and that shows the dystopian, the futuristic. So the dystopian subgenre, which is this film focuses specifically, is it's very catastrophic. It's mostly a pessimistic version of the future, and it does have recurring themes within science fiction. We see corrupt politicians, which again, RoboCop, THX, THX 138, Blade Runner, and Ghost in the Shell, which is again very repetitive, but not exactly repetitive, more like a common theme. And those common themes are what make science fiction, and the dystopian subgenre a genre. So, as I said before, science fiction does change the world. Our world has a lot of things that we've seen are do come from science fiction. I am 100% sure that Elon Musk saw something about a movie where someone put a chip in his brain, and he was, I want to do that. So, same way, we are, if we're like it or not, we're influenced by science fiction. Our development as a species, as a people, as a society, does push us forward. Oh, excuse me, I pressed the wrong button. And a view that science fiction has forced us to adopt is Frankenstein. Frankenstein, not only on what it is to play God, but a very interesting example that when the book came out, people were referring to Frankenstein as certain people of certain politicians. So again, this deformed creature has made us believe in corrupt politicians. It has changed how we refer to them. Such a story has influenced us in ways that it's not even related to the book. We are never gonna know what science fiction is gonna change for us. So, in conclusion, excuse me a second. In conclusion, presenting several physical and emotional themes. Ghost in the Shell portrays an accurate display of what is a science fiction film. A lot of its themes, they are very specific on the subject. Who am I? How far this robotic limbs gonna take me? But also, we see so much of what it means to be me. What is me made out of? It pushes a simple concept and it forces us through it, both with science and with philosophy, science fiction, combining the physical with the esoterical. Most science fiction films are used to serve a purpose as a condition between science and philosophy, making the films about experiments, thought experiments, and an introspective catharsis. It will give us a conclusion, but when you reach a finish line, there's another start line right behind it, and that's what science fiction does for us. We see how science fiction presents different tropes in many films, adding to the previous argument that science fiction films have in common talking about fears of the future, and those fears manifest themselves. Right now, the writer's strike is all about AI. It's about the fear of AI, and as a little side tangent, we see that presented in films right now. A relevant example again, the latest Guardians of the Galaxy had a phrase that is, a populace that cannot think for themselves will cease to exist. And we can interpret it now, even though if it wasn't written like that, we can interpret it as AI. AI will only recycle. AI will only look at what was written before and stitch several things together. It will Frankenstein a script. But the writer's strike is all about that pushing out of it, which I am sure once the writer's strike is over, there's going to be a lot of writing about it. There's going to be a lot of films talking about how AI is awful. So in conclusion, this is my presentation about Ghost in the Shell. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it.